Imagine this is where you live. There's a cot over here, a metal sink and toilet over there. You go out in the yard every day, and then you're locked up again in this cell for years. More than 2.2 million people are locked up in American prisons right now. This is an 8 by 12 foot cell at the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, now preserved as a monument. It's a different shape, but not much bigger than this red dot. You might be surprised to learn that in 1829, the individual prison cell was introduced as a progressive idea. The aim of incarceration was to awaken the inmate's conscience and to make him a better person. Most sentences were not longer than 2 years, and after doing their time, inmates were expected to return to normal life in society. Today, the American criminal justice system has dropped the idea of rehabilitation and expanded the use of incarceration massively. 2 years is on the low end of many sentences, and a prison record makes it nearly impossible to live normally in society, to do the ordinary things that enable us to be independent adults and good citizens, like finding a job, renting an apartment, voting, and getting an education. Winford Rembert is an artist who lives in New Haven, Connecticut. He spent 7 years in prison as a young man, and he paints about it now. This is one of his paintings. Rembert told me about life after prison. He said, "When you get out of prison, your life is over because your prison sentence follows you wherever you go." Rembert has been fighting that battle for the last 45 years. If our prison system no longer intends to rehabilitate, what purpose does it serve? As a philosopher, I've grappled with the latest theories of criminal punishment. The most popular one is based on the idea that justice has not been done until the guilty get the punishment they deserve. Justice demands retribution. A determination to hurt criminal wrongdoers promises to balance the scales of retributive justice. Yet it keeps us from thinking about why people commit crimes and who we are locking away. In prison, you're not likely to find psychologically healthy people who had been leading promising lives. Instead, you meet people who had hard lives before landing in prison. Many inmates struggle with mental illness. Others have suffered abuse and neglect as children. According to a report by the U.S. Department of Justice, over half of all prison inmates have a serious mental health disorder. Could it really be that these are the people who deserve the punishment they get? Eric Clark shot and killed a police officer. Our society demands the harshest penalties for crimes like his. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. In 2006, the United States Supreme Court heard his appeal. Why? Because when Eric Clark pulled the trigger, it was a desperate attempt to defeat a dangerous space alien. The court acknowledged Clark's delusional schizophrenia, but affirmed his conviction and life sentence. They ruled that his psychosis was irrelevant to deciding whether he intended to kill a human being. Does Eric Clark deserve to spend his life in prison? Now consider the case of Sharon Patterson. She was caring for a 2-year-old boy who was not her son. When he wet his bed, she decided to stop giving him water in the evening. He also sometimes refused solid food, and to try to get him to eat, she decided to restrict his water during the day as well. Withholding water from a child is a dangerous thing to do, and as a result, the boy died. Sharon Patterson was convicted of criminally negligent homicide and sentenced to 10 years in prison. What I haven't told you yet is that she is intellectually disabled. She didn't understand the harm she was doing. She thought she was helping. The court recognized that she didn't grasp the danger of her actions, but it upheld her conviction on the basis that a reasonable person would have. Did Sharon Patterson deserve to go to prison? What about someone who steals to support a drug addiction? More than 2 million people are afflicted with an opioid disorder in the United States today. But addiction does not mitigate punishment for any crime. Or consider the thousands of people, and Eric Clark is one of them, sentenced to life in prison for crimes they committed as juveniles. Studies show that childhood abuse and neglect increase criminal delinquency by at least 40%. That truth, however, mitigates neither guilt nor punishment. How do we make ethical sense of these legal results? Do we have any reason for confidence that moral retribution fits the law? Well, you might be thinking that the American criminal justice system does not now deliver just desserts, but it could if we were to roll back the sentences of teenagers and people afflicted with mental illness or addiction, and those who are intellectually disabled. So you might think that if we were to punish less and more selectively, we still have a chance to achieve retributive justice. But some disturbing facts would remain. American prisons are filled with people who are poor. Data indicate that incarcerated people across all race and ethnicity groups earned about 40% less before going to prison than their non-incarcerated peers. They are also disproportionately people who have been subjected to racial harassment and discrimination. But poverty and racial subordination are not factors that mitigate a criminal offender's just desserts. So maybe there's a voice in your head that says, hold on, criminal justice is about individual responsibility. However unfair your social circumstances may be, you are responsible for your actions. When a person commits a crime, even if that person is desperately poor, traumatized, addicted, or mentally ill, we owe it to the victim and to law-abiding citizens to remove that person from society and to mark him as bad. Damaged, perhaps, but bad nonetheless. It is this seemingly natural conclusion that the criminal offender is a bad person that ignites our interest in retribution. It inflames our anger, hatred, and desire to punish. And we may even congratulate ourselves for having this reaction. Now, think of someone you know who either committed a crime or was on the edge of serious trouble. Maybe that person was your classmate, or your neighbor, or your child, or maybe even yourself, driving home from a dinner party after several glasses of wine. Did that person go to prison? If not, what if they had? Wow, that would have been awful. She made a mistake, but she's not a bad person, and she doesn't deserve to be treated like a criminal. So here's what I think. Our admiration for criminal punishment isn't really about giving anyone what they deserve. It's about removing some people from society, whether or not they get what they deserve. We don't feel responsible for their problems, and we don't value their membership in society. So we lock them away in warehouses designed for people. We are warehousing mental illness, addiction, abuse, and deprivation. We are twisting our collective failures into a righteous condemnation of people whose lives we deem to be expendable. We don't acknowledge our collective injustice. We're more comfortable with the thought that the people we banish from society deserve their fate. But what if we were more honest with ourselves? And what if we were to discard the idea of retribution from our notion of justice? Well, we would be faced with a choice about whether to support democracy's promise to treat all of its members as equal persons with the same basic rights, liberties, and opportunities. We would be free to consider the full impact of crime and punishment, to count the human cost not only to the victim, but also to the defendant. We could decide to lock people up only as a last resort, when public safety truly requires it. We could be sure to treat all people with dignity, even when they've committed crimes. And we could work together to address our collective failures to deliver health care, equal education, and socioeconomic justice. It is for us, the free, to dedicate ourselves to this work. And it is entirely fitting and proper that we should do this, so that we might bring forth a nation dedicated to the proposition that all people are created equal.